Welcome back to the Two Pointers podcast. I'm Trevor Everett, and just want to do a quick intro here at the top. We're recording this kind of late at night, so I don't want to be too loud here. But as you're hearing this, you'll see in the title, we had a good friend of the program, Alex Golden, who's very reliable as a Pacers content creator, reporter, writer. He wears many hats, but super big thank you to Alex for the support and coming on the show to talk about the Pascal Siakam trade, as you heard and as you saw. I think we dove into some really intricate and interesting things about that trade that just doesn't, deeper than your scratch level surface, like grades and who won and who lost, and we got into some really interesting conversations about it. So again, big thank you to Alex. I wanted to do this intro really quick to explain a few things. This one is a little shorter. Alex had to get on to another show. He's a busy guy. We appreciate his time. This one was supposed to be paired with a open, or paired with a I guess you could say whatever, another segment. It would have been a solo with me talking through mid-majors to fear in March Madness, but have no fear. You'll see that show at the end of this week. NBA midseason awards will be posted next Wednesday. That's with Grayson Hill making his return this season. I have a feeling the Thunder get brought up plenty, as they should. As I'm recording this, they took over the number 1 seed in the West. So a lot of really intricate things coming there from the NBA. Looking forward to some great conversations, some great discourse there. Don't forget, Two Pointers is brought to you in part by SeatGeek. SeatGeek, code 2Pointers gets you $20 off your first purchase. Big thank you to SeatGeek for being the presenting sponsor of the Two Pointers podcast. $20 off your first purchase. Think concert, sporting event, NBA game, college basketball game. March Madness is coming up. You'll be able to go see your favorite team. If they make the tournament, you'll get $20 off your first purchase. Code 2Pointers, SeatGeek.com, or link in the top of the description takes you into the app to download and to sign up for that account. Greatly appreciate the support there. As always, again, talking Pascal Siakam trade with Alex Golden, and you'll hear things like mid-majors to fear in March Madness. That episode should be out either late Thursday or early Friday. So a little extra bonus pod week for you. And then, again, just cranking out the content right now as best I can. NBA, like I said, mid-season awards are coming up very soon. We just hit the midway point just the end of last week. So not super late there. I wanted to have time to really prep it for you. So thank you again to SeatGeek for sponsoring, and enjoy the interview with Alex. All right, as you heard at the top, we're joined again, I think about roughly a year later, by Alex Golden, friend of the program. When this trade went down, I pulled my brain together and I said, look, I feel a certain way one way or the other. Then I changed my mind. I said, how about the person I think I trust the most right now in the Pacers community and then the Pacers content world? And I think since then, I think Blue Wire, and you guys have had some billboards. So first of all, I'll lead you into it. At Alex Golden NBA on X or Twitter, whatever people call it nowadays. For those that didn't listen last year, maybe new to the show, introduce yourself, what you do, and then we'll jump right into it.
Yeah, no, I appreciate you having me back on, Trevor. And for anybody that's new listening to this show, make sure you guys subscribe and give Trevor all the love that he deserves here at Two Pointers. But our podcast is Setting the Pace, a Pacers podcast. We're pretty much a daily Pacers podcast. Me and my co-host, Mike Facci. I've also got a blog called theblueandgolden.substack.com that you guys can check out. The West Coast road trip kicked my butt in terms of trying to keep up writing after doing post-game production, post-game podcast, and all the production that comes with that. So kind of took a detour on that for the last week, but we'll get back to it once we get back into Eastern Standard Time. But I want to thank everybody, for checking this podcast out and for your support of my work. And thanks for having me back on. I'm excited to talk about what's going on in Pacerland.
Yeah, the obvious thing, as people are going to see in the title, is, of course, the trade. And I'll go ahead and run through it. There was a piece of this that I didn't even realize had happened, so I'm going to kind of lay it out. Correct me if I'm wrong on anything, and then I kind of want to just jump right into it. I know we got a time crunch tonight. So the Pacers are, of course, receiving Pascal Siakam, and then the Raptors are going to receive Bruce Bowen, or have received already. You guys have played games. Jordan Nwora. This is where it gets funky. The 2024 Pacers first, unprotected that I know of. 2024 least favorable of, and here's where it gets funky. Jazz, Clippers, Rockets, Thunder. So one of those is going to be the least favorable, and that's who the Raptors get, which I think is kind of a fun wrinkle. And then a 2026 top 4 protected. I really like that, just in case things go off the rails, yada, yada, yada. And then I saw the Kira Lewis part of this, and then I realized he wasn't a Pacer. Like I totally missed that part of it. So is
Yeah.
that all correct?
Yeah. So what happened is it was two separate trades. So the Pacers had
Okay.
about seven-ish, $8 million in their cap space. They took on Kira Lewis from the Pelicans and got a second round pick by doing that deal. And then they sent back cash considerations to the Pelicans. And so then they took Kira Lewis's $5 million plus Jordan Ward's $3 million, and then Bruce Brown's 22-ish, 23-ish, whatever it was, to aggregate those three salaries together to send that to Toronto to get Pascal Siakam. It just equaled enough salary so they could aggregate all those contracts together to get Pascal Siakam. And what ends up being really nice for the Pacers here is basically they only had to get rid of Warren Brown for Pascal Siakam instead of trading any of their other future young players. Now, the pick protection, I do believe the 2024 pick for the Pacers this year that they did give up is top 3 protected. So that is one wrinkle that's involved in that. And then James Johnson was the 15th man on the roster for the Pacers. In order to acquire Kira Lewis, they had to waive him to create a roster spot, but they brought him back on a 10-day contract, and he'll probably sign 2 10-day contracts before the trade deadline in case they decide to make another move. So that way there's not any guaranteed money that they have to waive once again. So very interesting maneuvers here by the Pacers, but that's what happens when you have a guy like Ted Wu who pretty much like helped write the salary cap at one point.
Yeah, look, and this is why I love having you on, because like I knew that I wasn't like I knew I had that about 90% right, and it's just fun to hear all the wrinkles for people that really cover this, specifically a team like the Pacers on a day-to-day basis. So, I mean, let's be honest, the James Johnson thing is so funny because he was signed after that Bucks brawl debacle, whatever
Yes.
it was with the ball. I just thought that was fun. So look, I respect you enough to not sit here and put you through a grades or a who won or a who lost. So I wrote down, I'll just read verbatim. I just want to cut through the crap. And here's what I mean by that is, in your opinion, what was the Pacers' motivation or reason for making this move, and specifically weeks before the deadline?
I think it was just to kind of get him acclimated in here because if you look at it, Pascal Siakam will play the final 41 games of the Pacers this season, which is half the year. So that gives them a good chance to kind of see what he fits like in here with this group. And I think it also gives Pascal a chance to kind of see how he fits in with this group. And with him being an unrestricted free agent at the end of the season, he has some options. But I think getting him in here early enough to let him feel like, okay, he can see what the bigger picture is here. He gets a better feel for his teammates. That makes a lot of sense to me too. There was some rumblings out there about Bruce Brown being unhappy and that kind of thing. John Hollinger reported that in The Athletic. Nobody really here heard anything about that. It was kind of a surprise when that report came out because Bruce just seemed to be really go with the flow. But also the Pacers, they were making a move and bringing in Bruce Brown, paying him as much as they did and giving him a team option on that second year. It was more than likely going to be involved in a trade if the Pacers were trying to get better. But the Pacers needed to answer their question mark at the long-term position in terms of getting a guy to play power forward. They haven't had a power forward since Thaddeus Young in 2018, 2019. So they played with Sabonis and Turner for a while. When they traded Sabonis, Jalen Smith started last year at the power forward. They traded for Obi Toppin this year. Obviously, Obi Toppin was not the long-term answer as a starting power forward. And then Jarris Walker is just such he's just an unpolished rookie that's trying to figure out who he is, figure out the speed of the game, and just get acclimated. So as the Pacers are trying to win, Jarris just isn't ready to take on that heavy of a load. So they needed someone that was a proven number 2 kind of guy. I don't really see Pascal as like a number 1 on a really good team, but I think he can be a very good number 2 next to Tyrese Halliburton.
I mean, he was the number 2. I mean, people forget, like, it's debatable, Lowry, whatever. He was the number 2 or maybe 3. Let's just say somewhere between the 2.5 best player on the 2019 championship team. So yeah. I just don't see how that, like, that can't be overblown. I love the way you answered that because that basically every question I had left, I could ask after that as a follow-up. So I guess I'll start with this. You mentioned the 1-year deal. Everyone's going to have their opinion. People are going to hear things. People are going to share things. When you heard it initially, and then you can answer it, I guess now, we're a couple of days removed now from it when I messaged you. So the confidence level for re-signing has to be there. You don't do this deal if that's not the case. I guess it's not really a question. It's more of where you like, as soon as you heard it, you probably knew it was a 1-year deal. And B, were you immediately like, oh crap, was that a lot for a 1-year deal?
Yeah, I honestly didn't think it was that much to give up for a 1-year rental because this draft class is not very good. So you're giving up 2 probably bottom 3rd draft picks in 2024. You're giving up a guy in Bruce Brown that you probably didn't have any intentions of really re-signing because he makes a lot of money. Jordan Moore was nowhere on this rotation. The only thing you're really giving up for Pascal is a 2026 first round pick that could be somewhat valuable, but I think the idea of picks is always better than the actuality of picks. And we see that happen all the time. People exaggerate. Oh, they got 3 picks. Well, like, how good are these picks really? Like, let's talk about it. And we know that Kevin Pritchard, his draft track record has not been the greatest. They did get Ben Mather and they did get Jarris Walker, Andrew Nimhard the last 2 years. But prior to that, when they've been drafting in like that late teen, early 20s, mid 20s, they've not really found anybody that's stuck with them at all. And I don't even think they've signed somebody yet since Pritchard's been the president on a second rookie year contract or second deal of their rookie year. Or second deal of their rookie contract. Sorry, I'm saying that wrong. But the last guy that I think they extended on that rookie deal was Miles Turner, who was drafted in 2015. So that just goes to show you how the Pacers have kind of missed the mark when it comes to drafting. So they go out and get a proven commodity. And you're right, Pascal Siakam, the expiring contract, you did feel like, okay, there is a slight chance that he could leave. But we had Chad Buchanan on, the Pacers general manager. And when he came on our podcast back in August, he talked about how he doesn't think free agency is going to be as, big as people think it is. So having money in free agency doesn't necessarily mean you're going to be able to go out and get free agents because guys aren't hitting the market as much. So his whole thing was like kind of getting ahead of the game. And that's why I think this was basically free agency for the Pacers. It just happened in January. And they did have to give up a pick or 2 or 3, right? But they didn't really give up anything I think they valued super close to them, just because they didn't give up the Benedict Matherins, the Jarris Walkers, even an Andrew Nimhard or Jalen Smith. Jalen Smith reportedly was someone that the Raptors wanted really bad. Pacers said, no, you're not getting Jalen Smith. And that's pretty funny. Seeing he's on a player option this year, he could leave in the summer. So I just think that the Pacers put their flag on the ground and said, you can have this, and that's all you're getting. We're not giving you anything else. And the Raptors didn't have a better offer. So I think their confidence in Pascal resigning is pretty high, but I think they're more confident in the fact that Tyrese Halliburton is going to make life easier for him and convince him that this is probably the best basketball opportunity for him to win. And Pascal Siakam is a good player. Tyrese Halliburton has the case for being the best point guard in the NBA. You can make that case. A lot of good point guards out there, but you can make the case for Tyrese being that. So leads the league in assists. He makes life easy on everybody. He plays a fun style of basketball. And I think that once those two kind of figure each other out, you're going to really see a dynamic duo. They look pretty good in their debut. They've only played 1 game together, but you got to remember, they're still trying to figure each other out. Don't really know that on-court chemistry either. So I'm pretty confident that Tyrese Halliburton is going to be able to sway anybody that's questioning whether they should stay or not to return and play with him.
Look, I had this written down verbatim, and that answered it already. So was this move because even with Halliburton, do the Pacers not, and you don't have to answer this, is more of rhetorical based on how you answered it, but was this move because even with Halliburton, do the Pacers not feel like they could be a strong free agent destination? You spoke to Buchanan a little bit. It's also the same thing I've heard. Ryan Russillo has made this point many times on his show when he used to be in Boston. Danny Ainge, whenever he was willing to share, would be like, people overrate free agency. And I think that and that coming from Danny Ainge in Boston, by the way, who could sign any free agent anytime as long as they had the money, right? Because it's Boston, LA, Chicago, New York, etc. Obviously Halliburton makes things so much more enticing, which I guess is what ties into my question. I'm kind of putting you on the spot here a little bit, but I think you know how. I think you understand where I'm coming from when I ask this. But So Sam, is it Amick? Came out with this. Amick. Yeah, see, I'm the worst with pronunciations. The Warriors wanted Pascal Siakam, but the interest did not appear to be mutual. And quote, the Warriors were interested, and I don't think he was excited about anything past this season with them. Why do you think that is? And that obviously not Pascal wasn't in Toronto's front office with Masai Ujiri going, trade me to Indiana instead, right? That's not obviously what happened.
Yeah.
Reasonably. But why do you think that is, that the Warriors feel like this destination where, he's going to feel way better? Obviously, you spoke to Halliburton already, so maybe thinking outside the box there. But, is Halliburton that big of a draw, you think, now to guys, especially where, again, you mentioned 12 assists per game. Plus, I don't know if you said that, but I'm just going off of what I saw this morning. and he's on a historic pace. But I guess my overall thought there is like, why do you think there was this waning interest away from the Warriors if you're Pascal?
Yeah, I mean, just there's a couple of things here. I think there's three big reasons. Number one, it's financially. The Warriors are way up against the luxury tax. And so for them to even be able to come to a max agreement with Pascal Siakam was very unlikely. And I don't think they would have done it. So it would have been more like a 1-year rental type thing for the Warriors. And so I think that Pascal kind of read the writing on the wall. That's number one. Number two, I think a lot of it has to do with the age of this group. They're all getting a little bit older. We don't know how much longer Draymond and Clay are really going to be able to play at their highest level. You can still say Steph Curry is one of the top guys in the league, no doubt about it. Really good player. But at this point, you have to look long-term. And so you're looking at Steph Curry, who's in, mid-30s, right? Where Tyrese Halliburton's 23 years old. Tyrese Halliburton's locked up for the next 5 years after this season. Could Pascal Siakam sign a 5-year contract to keep him in line with Tyrese Halliburton on the same level contract-wise, and they can kind of finish out their career together? I mean, 5 years in Indiana compared to 5 years in Golden State does sound a little bit crazy just because of how awesome California would be compared to maybe a smaller market like Indiana.
Not the taxes.
Especially,
not for that kind of deal.
A lot of taxes. That's true. I know
deal.
Pascal had a big sway in Toronto. Toronto's a really big city compared to Indiana or Indianapolis too. So that does to me play a little bit of a factor. Like the smaller market, it is quieter. Is that something he's going to be able to like fully embrace? I don't know necessarily, but I just think that Halliburton's style of play, Halliburton's a pass first guy. He's going to get Siakam so many open looks, and they really need him to kind of do the same thing for Tyrese, because if he starts going, they can't double team Tyrese like they had been. And the Pacers just needed that second guy. So I just feel like the main reason why, though, was the money, because the Pacers were going to have that money in the offseason, that cap space, to sign him outright if they wanted to without trading for him. So, but by trading for him, it kind of shows you, hey, we're committed to you. We gave up 3 picks for you. That's how much we want you here.
So, all right, I want to touch on the Bruce Brown thing. The way it was answered earlier, it was easy for us to come back to him because I do think he's really important. Like, I know when you leave Nikola Jokic, right? Like, you leave a guy that's one of the best passers of all time, that obviously draws its own weight for what kind of, player Bruce Brown's been. When you dive into the minute stuff or the lineup stuff, and I really like this NBA.com lineup tool, and I'll kind of just be quick and read you this stuff so we can get into it. Mm-hmm. I cut out any of the 1-game samples, the 5-minute samples, whatever. But the second most minutes, I guess, let me back it up. The second most games played together of the best 5-man lineup for the Pacers. The best one is Miles Turner, Bruce Brown, Obi Toppin, Tyrese Halliburton, and Benedict Mathurin. Okay, so 20 games played, not as many minutes, not as many points, negative plus minus. The actual best lineup, if you average some of this stuff, I kind of took some time today to play around with this, is without a doubt is Halliburton, Obi Toppin, Bruce Brown, Buddy Hield, Miles Turner. 17 games together, 10 minutes a game, which actually it doesn't sound like a lot, but then when you look at the rest of the averages, it's the highest by a good margin. 29.7 points, 54% shooting, 39% three-point shooting, 85% from the line. And, I could sit here and go over all the steal block numbers, whatever. It's the best block number by far. It's the best assist number, like without a doubt, in the 7s, 7.9 to be exact. And then the best plus minus at 4.4. So I guess, A, does that lineup surprise you? You've watched this team more than anybody I know. And then B, how big of an impact is it going to be, understanding that you're swapping Bruce Brown for Pascal? Maybe that's obviously an adjustment there. This is kind of where you dive into some of the coaching stuff, with Obi Toppin being really important in most of these good lineups. So let's break that down, I guess. There's no really landing question here, but A, does that surprise you? And B, is there anything that you'd like to comment on from watching this team more than anybody I know?
Well, I will say this. That team was doing really good offensively early on in the season just because the Pacers were playing at such a high level offensively. Now, this group, I know they have a good net rating, but defensively, this group could not last and was not closing out games together. That's the bottom line. So I think that it had some moments. Obviously, that group did start together, but that group they dealt with some injuries here and there after the in-season tournament, and they weren't able to kind of fully be themselves like they once were. But before Pascal came, the previous 13 games, they had changed the starting lineup up. They took Buddy Hield out and they took Obi Toppin out. They put Aaron Nesmith in and they put Jalen Smith into that starting five with Bruce, Tyrese, and Miles. And they ended up going 10-3 over 13 games. So it was kind of like, okay, we had to kind of shift things around a little bit. There was a lot of offense in the starting lineup and not a lot in the second unit. And Obi Toppin has shot the ball very well this year individually. So his stats are really good. Obviously, any lineup with Tyrese Halliburton, I think it's going to be any lineup with Tyrese and Miles together, you're going to see probably some better numbers there. Buddy's spacing is huge. Buddy's chemistry with Ty and Miles is also huge. So I think that it all just kind of made sense. But that's why this team had to make a trade, in my opinion, for a guy like Pascal, just because you can make the case on any given night it could be somebody different. And we saw throughout the season, maybe the second leading scorer one night to Tyrese Halliburton was Obi Toppin, or it was Aaron Nesmith, or it was Benedict Mathurin, or Buddy Hield, or Miles Turner, like Bruce Brown. Like there was one point where we'd had like 7 or 8 guys be the second leading scorer, and nobody really kind of separated themselves as that second player. So that to me is why I think the Pacers really had to make this deal. And Bruce Brown, there's no doubt about it. He's a good player. But at the same time, he is better served off the bench. And in my opinion, you're paying a guy about $22, $23 million a year who is a role player averaging around 11 points a game. And yeah, that doesn't sound like a terrible thing because he impacts winning. But when you're sitting there playing him 35 minutes a game, sometimes you can't rely on him to do that every single night because that's just not who he is. Like he was really good with Denver playing in a different role, kind of being their backup point guard and feeding off of Jokic and maybe running that second unit himself. But I just think that there's a lot of teams that wanted him. He decided to choose the money over choosing the better fit for him in terms of winning a championship again this upcoming season. So he kind of had to know that was like part of the nature of the business when he did make this decision to sign with the Pacers because he's a good player. And with that team option, a lot of teams are going to be willing to pay for him, especially with how big contracts are in today's NBA. So, I think Bruce Brown will be missed a little bit for his defense. He was fast. He liked to play in transition. That was one of the big reasons why the Pacers went out and got him and Obi because they want to play in transition a little bit more. But when he was out with his injury, I think it was a knee injury, Andrew Nembhard got some minutes at the 2 over him. And I felt like over about a 5-game stretch, Nembhard looked better with that group as the shooting guard over Bruce. I think he's a better defender and a better secondary ball handler. He's not a better shooter than Bruce, but other than that, I felt like he did some other good things. So, Bruce will be missed because he did some good things, but I don't think at the end of the day, he's someone that you don't move in a trade to get a guy like Pascal Siakam.
I don't think there's anything I can add to that would make anything. I think that was perfect. I think that is exactly what I was looking for, and I think the answer speaks for itself there. So I told you at the beginning I want to cut through the crap of grades, winners, losers, like the stuff that I think is fun, but I think you're better than that, and I know you are, so thank you. But I had to kind of still give you one. So does this raise the team's ceiling or floor this year more?
Good question.
Or both. I mean, both is the cop-out answer, of course.
Yeah, it is.
That's why I didn't leave you with both.
I would say it probably raises their ceiling more. Just because I felt like this team, the surprise run to me was them going 10-3 in January, beating Milwaukee 4 out of 5 times this year, being able to beat Boston twice. That to me was a little bit surprising. They beat Miami on the road without Tyrese Halliburton. That's an insane win. So they've just really kind of, they've outplayed their expectations already this year. Yeah, they lost their first 2 games to Pascal Siakam. Tyrese Halliburton came back for the first one. He didn't play in the second one. They were on a road trip. I think there was just so much going on that if anybody's freaking out after the first 2 games, just go look at what happened to the Clippers when they got James Harden. They lost like 5 in a row. Then they go on like a huge winning streak, win like 17-20, something crazy like that. I can't remember exactly what the numbers were, but they were went on a tear and they were just tearing teams up left and right. And I think that the Pacers, they've got this rough schedule here. Long road trip, no Tyrese Halliburton, but 1 game. The 1 game that he does come back for, he gets hurt. I just think that with this team right now, they have a really pretty nice schedule here in February coming up. Once they can get through this crazy January schedule that is just insane, 17 games in 31 days. They play the Celtics 3 times, the Bucks twice, Phoenix twice, Denver twice. They play Philadelphia, Atlanta twice. I mean, they just had a really rough schedule. So come February, they're going to have a chance to kind of get acclimated with one another. And I think that this is a team that could potentially be a top 4 seed in the Eastern Conference if everything clicks the way that I anticipate it could click. But so far with Pascal in the first 2 games I've seen, it feels like it's going to be a seamless transition once everybody gets healthy and they can kind of solidify this rotation.
I had Jarris Walker 3 in the draft, and I think it's only going to be so good for him to play, hopefully, and learn behind Pascal, because I see a lot of similar games with theirs offensively if stuff can kind of go right for Jarris. I really, really like that guy a lot. All right, on the way out, I got to get you to the next whatever you're doing. So I've been thinking about this recently, and I figured I'd ask you. I was going to do it whether we were doing this pod or not. Knowing what we know now, do the Kings do the Tyrese Haliburton trade again?
No, come on now.
Really? Someone told me no, yes the other day. Someone said they still probably do it. That's why
they will say that because they want to stay face. But come on, they try to trade Fox instead. I mean, I like Fox and I like Sabonis, but the ceiling of Haliburton is higher than both of those guys. Look at the All-Star votes. Tyrese Haliburton leads the East in guards with like 2 million votes.
Deservingly, by the way.
Fox and Sabonis, I don't even think combined have that. So come on, what are we talking about? That's Indiana too. You're talking about Indiana versus Sacramento. Like, they're both smaller markets, but I don't know. Come on, everybody. Like,
I knew where you were going to go with it. I just wanted to hear it.
I'm not even trying to be biased. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, I get
think
it.
about it. If they would have been able to trade De'Aaron Fox and got Sabonis, then you got Tyrese and Sabonis there together. That's pretty interesting.
Yeah.
I just don't know if those two would have fit as well together because Tyrese likes having the ball in his hands, and so does DeMontis. So it was a good trade. Everybody's going to say it's a win-win trade. I definitely think it's a win-win, but I mean, if you're looking at all 3 players and projecting who ends up having the best career at the end of the day, Tyrese Haliburton, come on.
Yeah, I completely agree. I just thought it was an interesting thing to think about. So.
Yeah, it's interesting for sure. I appreciate the question.
All right, so my time management was almost perfect, so 24 minutes and some change. I got to get you out of here, but plug away. Thank you, first of all. Let people know where they can find you and anything you're working on coming up in the future. I know trade deadline's coming up. You said there may be more moves. Whatever you want to plug.
Yeah, Trevor. I mean, we never know what's going to happen. This podcast, though, is going to have you covered. Setting the Pace, a Pacers podcast. We have it covered every day for you, Monday through Friday. And if there's something interesting that happens, like a Pascal Siakam trade, maybe we'll even throw out a weekend episode for you guys. But, you know, you mentioned it. We've got a billboard now, which is pretty cool. Worked out a really cool connection. So we've got we're paying for that for the next couple of months, February through April. So pretty sweet stuff there. It's on an electronic one, so it's not like it's just sitting there by itself all day long, but it's on a rotator, and that's pretty sweet. You know, you can never pass up a good opportunity to advertise your show, but I really appreciate the time. And if you guys are into reading about stuff, you know, I try to do a little bit more of a deep dive into things, not just so like generic podcast conversation stuff in the articles. Try to do some film every once in a while here and there. And I'm going to get back to doing that consistently. I'm really excited about that, but this last week just kicked my butt with this West Coast road trip and the time zone change. So I would just say thanks everybody for listening to this. If you've made it this far, and give Trevor a follow. I think Trevor does a great job on the 2 Pointers podcast and get you up to date. Even if he has to work on his name pronunciations a little bit more, we'll get there, Trevor. Don't beat yourself up.
A year later and nothing's changed. I can get Jalen Smith, I can get Tyrese Haliburton, but after that I'd start. Man, look, a year later I still haven't gotten them. But
you got Pascal Siakam, all right.
Oh, I mean, yeah. The fewer the syllables, the better. Like, I'm good. I'm good.
What's Giannis's last name?
Antetokounmpo. Okay, after 6 years. There is an old story, though. I won't tell you today, but, like, I basically, like, couldn't spell his name at one point, writing it down, even, like, after he was an all-star at one point. Like, after multiple all-star seasons, it got me. Finally, I can do it on a keyboard without even looking. It's like a thing that I'm proud of, and I've made it on here. So
I can spell it too. Yeah,
it's like a crowning achievement now for NBA people. It's like you got to be able to get the news out quickly with his name. So thank you again at Alex Golden NBA on X, Twitter. Everything for him will be linked in the description below. Got to get you running again, but thank you again. I will look forward to talking to you in the future.
Yes, sir. We'll see you.